All right, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. Merci d'être ici. My name is Alexi. I work for Jumpstreet Tours. And today we're going to talk about our international travel webinar. I'm accompanied by Olivia Laverdure and David Zaragoza. So Olivia is our specialist for any French language tours. And we have David, the lucky guy who is in Costa Rica right now, visiting with some of our groups, and he is our specialist for Spanish specific tours. So Spanish learning, service learning, and all the different tours that we have in Latin America and Spain. So I'm just going to start this off. So who is Jumpstreet? So basically, we are located in Montreal. We've been operating tours for 35 years. And so our specialty is language focused. So we have if you noticed, my mother tongue is French. And so we lead tours in French and in Spanish. So our main destinations are mostly Montreal, Quebec, France. But we also lead tours to Spain, Costa Rica, and a lot of different countries in Latin America. Today, we're going to talk about mainly three things. After 2020 came, then we're 2022, 2023. A lot of things have changed in the past couple of years. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of industry updates. I know there's people that have traveled before with groups, some are new. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of industry updates where things stands in terms of educational travel. We're going to have trip planning tips with Livia, and we're going to go over some destinations, some cool new destinations for you, for your students, and also new products that you can offer your students. If you have any questions during the webinar, don't hesitate to use the chat. Every now and then I'll look at the chat and be able to answer some of the questions that come up. Okay, great. So in terms of industry updates, if you've traveled before 2020 and haven't traveled since, I want to say that the last couple of years it's been different. But I'm happy to say that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Things are going back to normal. But it's important to know some of the changes and the components of a tour. So typically you'll have a motor coach, you'll have a hotel, you'll have tour leader, and attraction and restaurants. And some tours will have a flight because you're going abroad. If we talk about the air for just a moment, after 2022, when people started traveling again, it was extremely hard for the air industry because there was less routes. The supply chain was broken, so airlines couldn't repair their planes. So as a result of this, there was a lot of people wanting to travel, and there were less room for them to be in flights, which meant that the price of the flights, the airfare, went up very, very much. Ourselves, we couldn't estimate anymore. We used to have flights that would go up by 3-4%. And in 2022 and 2023, it went up by 20, 25, even 30%. And that's not counting the fact that there was a lot of schedule change. The schedule changes on our tours, it used to be extremely rare. And in 22 and 23, we saw 80 to 85% of our trips suffered from schedule change, which is a lot. It's stressful for us because we can't sleep at night. We have to change flights, but also for you guys, for the travel organizers and the students who will get changes last minute. So that was quite stressful. The good thing here is that I think we're past that. Knock on wood, because we still have a lot of tours to go this year. We've only had a few this year. In general, the schedule change are very, very rare, and it's largely due to some reasons that are unexpected, such as weather, for instance, things that you would see before 2020. So we're back to normal there, and the airfare has stopped increasing tremendously as well, which is another great news for the future. We're seeing fares that are very reasonable, just small increases here and there. So that's, again, for you guys, for us, for the travelers, it's good news for the future. In terms of the other components that comprises a trip, You have the hotel. The hotels, again, it was, they were short of staff. They didn't renovate their property for a few years. We felt it. We really felt it in the few years that we've led tours in Europe, in North America, Latin America. It was the same story in all the different countries that we have tours in. We had reviews from our groups. We saw it in the industry. It was tough for the hotel industry, but this year again, we feel like it's coming back. It's bouncing back to levels that we could say are very close to 2019, 2020 before the pandemic, which is great. Really, the hotel industry is very resilient, and people are wanting to travel, so they're investing in their hotels, and again, that's great news for the future. The last thing that I want to point out in this update is the tour leaders, because if you've traveled with us or with any tour operator, you know that a good tour leader makes all the difference. We had before in 2020, we had 80 tour leaders with Jumpstreet traveling with us. They were all local. They were speaking the local language. They were trained. They were connecting with students. They were inspiring students to travel. It's always been our strength, and I know it was the case with a lot of different tour companies. Last year, when we started our season, we had 5 tour leaders. So it was very, very interesting moments, very challenging moments for us to restaff our tour leader team. And I'm happy to say that now we're almost fully restaffed, and they've gone on the road, they've been trained, and the reviews that we're getting this year are stellar compared to last year, where they were, of course, inexperienced. So again, that's another part where it's back to normal. And so the industry update is very positive, I would say, especially for next year. It's looking to be not as expensive as what we've seen over the past couple of years. So that's the good news. And the quality standards are back to 2019, 2020, which is awesome as well. So it's a great time. It's great timing to start planning an educational trip for sure. Now I'm going to give the baton or pass the baton to Livia, my colleague, who's going to explain to you a little bit of trip planning tips. Livia, just to mention, she is our pro of taking someone who's never traveled before and helping that person to materialize their dreams into a fantastic educational trip for their students. So that's really her specialty, and she'll take it over for this part.
Super cool, Alexis. Yeah, I'm Livia. I'm one of the tour consultants at Jumpstreet, and I've actually been with the business for over 13 years now, so lots of experience working with teachers. And this evening, I'll really be going over the steps on preparing a successful student trip and really ultimately, increase your chances of getting a trip off the ground, as it can be a bit harder than you think. But we're really there to help you maximize your efforts and help you materialize your trip. So Alexi, you can go to the next slide. Perfect. So before jumping into the steps to planning a trip, we did want to just touch base on the importance of planning in advance, planning ahead of time. For domestic trips, so within the US and Canada, we do recommend planning your trip at least 1 year in advance, and for international travel, between 1 and 1.5 years in advance. Domestic travel, it does require between 6 to 8 months of preparation. So the earlier that you get started, really the better the chance you'll have at getting the availabilities that you want in terms of program inclusions and also your preferred travel dates. And also planning early is going to give a chance to the students and their families to save up some money, do some fundraising, and just have the trip on their radar as well. So we can switch slides. Okay, so I'll be going through different steps to planning a successful trip. The first trip that you plan, it's always the hardest, and we know that price can be a barrier. But as a tour consultant, our job is really to work directly with you and empower you during the process to maximize your efforts and really help bring the tour to life. So the first step is getting a price estimate and a preliminary itinerary. And I'd say what's important to keep in mind is that one is never too early to start talking about the idea of a trip to your students. If you want to travel, you need interested students from the start. You can have the perfect itinerary, but if you don't have the student interest, the trip won't happen. So just keep in mind that you don't need the final product to start promoting, start garnering interest. So just getting a sample itinerary, getting a cost estimate, it's going to allow you to start talking about the trip to the students, get people excited about just the idea of travel. So once you know that the interest is there, you'll want to move to the next step and get approval from your school administration or your school board. And this really goes hand in hand with working with your tour consultant to really establish a detailed itinerary for your group and the different pricing scenarios. And as tour consultants, we're really there to help the trip organizer get all the documentation together to present the project to the administration. And this could include things like certificates of insurance, terms and conditions, different insurance options for the students, for example. And just something else to keep in mind is trying to be aware of other trips that might be happening at the school. If, for example, there's several trips taking place over the same school break, you might be splitting the potential pool of students, and ultimately that could decrease the chances of either trip getting off the ground. So it's just kind of having the global approach when you're planning a trip at your school. Step number 3, so you have your approval, you know that the interest is there. The next step is to plan an interest meeting with the students' parents. And Jumpstreet offers easy to organize trip promotion meetings. We go over subjects like the itinerary, the trip inclusions, the pricing, insurance options, down to the registration process and the payment platform, really to get everyone on the same page about the trip, the steps to come, and what's to come in the months ahead. And it's also really a great time for the parents to ask their questions and get some clarity as well. At that point, it's also a good time just to ask your travel consultant about any fundraising guidelines, scholarship opportunities, or any other incentives to travel that might be able to help out your group. And while we're on the topic of interest, I do think it's important to talk about kind of the target numbers per destination, what you should aim towards when planning a trip in terms of numbers. For international travel, so trips overseas to Europe, service learning trips to Central America, for example, really 20 to 25 participants is really a good target to have to help make the trip accessible to the community from a budget standpoint. And when it comes to domestic travel, so within the US or Canada, really getting as close as possible to a full motor coach, which is 50 students and 5 chaperones, is your optimal pricing. That being said, for domestic travel, getting a group of 20, 30, 40 students, it's still a great number to have. I'd say what you have to keep in mind is that whether you have 20 students on a motor coach or 50 students on a motor coach, you're paying the same price for the motor coach and other fixed costs like the tour leader. So the more students you have, ultimately the better your price will be. And we always quote groups as a private group so that you really get to travel kind of like a small family. But if you are flexible in your dates, if you're flexible with your itinerary, then combining with another school is always a great option. And in that case, we can organize trips for groups of 8, 10 students and potentially partner you with a neighboring school. So step number 4, collecting the initial deposit and planning upcoming payments. So following the parent meeting, that's really the time to launch the registration platform, collect the initial payment for the trip, and that's ultimately where you'll really see the firm commitment from the students. And at that time, the payment plan is also discussed with the organizing teacher and established for the group depending on the group needs. Some other responsibilities just to keep in mind that will kind of coincide with when the registration takes place is making sure that everyone has proper documentation for the trip well in advance. So if it's a destination that does require passports, it's a good idea to collect everyone's passport information early in advance, 4 months before the trip, verifying the passport expiration date and making sure it's valid for 6 months past the return date. And then other documentation to potentially look into could include things like visas, entry requirements for different countries, parent consent letters, and your tour consultant will really help you kind of supply you with documentation and point you in the right direction during this process. Number 5, evaluate key factors when partnering with your educational travel agency. While this is not really a step in the planning process, I'd say it's really something to globally keep in mind as you're shopping around, as you're looking at different travel companies, because it is easy to just take an itinerary and compare pricing, but there's really some key things to look for that could make a big difference in your planning experience and while you're on the road. So this includes things like access to a 24/7 emergency line for groups that are on tour. So really having that peace of mind that you're going to be supported while you're on the road. Having access to a risk management system like Crisis 24, which provides warning signs of any disruptions that could cause a risk to travel security, or just having a health and safety department that can be there to support and bring guidance to the team. Something else you'll want to look out for is just depending on which language you teach, the possibility of having like trilingual service, so being served in either French, Spanish, English. You'll also want to consider the experience of the tour consultants, and know that you're working with tour consultants who have been on the road and they really know what it's like to travel as part of a student group, and ultimately just kind of the years of experience that exist within the business. And lastly, something else, just to touch base on tour leaders, like Alexi was talking about, ask about what is the tour leader process? How are they selected? What is the training process like? And you can always look online. You can look at teachers' social media groups for referrals about tour leaders from a company, because as Alexi mentioned, the tour leader will ultimately play a huge role in the overall success of a trip. So that wraps up the different points I wanted to mention. So we can maybe open it up quickly to questions if there's any that popped up.
Yes. I have a couple questions for you, Livia. How many students in a group allows for a private group?
Great question. So it all depends on the budget of the community, because we can do a private tour for a group of 12, a group of 15, a group of 20. But as I mentioned, you'll want to keep in mind that the more students you have on tour, the better the price will be, because it's more students to split the cost of the motor coach, of the tour leader. But if the budget is there and the group wants to do really a private customized tour with only 10 people, that is possible. Under that, it's a bit tricky, but if you have a group of 10, 12 students and they're open to having a higher budget to travel as a solo group, it's possible. If not, we can join you with a neighboring school if that's possible.
Great, thank you. I have another question coming up. For industry updates, what I'm hearing from other traveling companies is that there are major differences still post-COVID. For example, not getting hotels in city centers, but staying outside of cities. Have you seen that? So it is a great point. Again, like 2022, 23, and 24 are different years. We've seen that in 22 and 23 for sure. A lot of hotels we're working with, we're talking Paris, Madrid, Rome, had less availabilities for us. In 24, the situation we found that is back to normal almost for the hotel availabilities. We typically stay in city centers, and we're trying to stay in city centers, especially in Europe, because we like to use public transit. We like for the students to walk and to really experience the city as locals. And we're still using these hotels. So I'd say that for that part, it's pretty back to where it was pre-COVID. And then also, what are you seeing with flights in terms of not getting direct flights? I don't see that as a problem. Again, there was less routes available in 22 and 23. They've opened up more routes. They used to, I want to say, consolidate groups a lot, which meant that yes, there were going to be some schedule change, but we don't see it as much as we saw it last year for sure. In terms of longer layovers, we haven't seen that as an issue. We tend to ourselves plan for a longer layover just to account for potential schedule change last minute. So where we used to say an hour and a half to 2 hours was okay as a layover, we tend to go to 2.5 hours, just to 3 hours, just to make sure that we have enough time if there is a flight delay, so that we don't miss our flight. But in general, I'd say it's pretty back to almost pre-COVID standards. We're not there yet, 100%, but it's definitely going on the right direction, we find. Thank you for the questions. I'm gonna go switch it over to our friend David, who will talk to us about destinations and cool new products.
Buenas tardes, buenas noches, everybody. Happy to be here with you guys today. So thank you, Livia. Thank you, Alexi, for the previous content. My name is David Zaragoza. I'm the person who organizes most of our trips to Latin America and Spain. I'm originally from Spain. I'm right now in Costa Rica. Sorry for the background. I could have chosen a better one to make you jealous on a, on a Thursday evening. It's only a wall this time. So I'm the last panelist of today's webinar. And I'm here to present just a few new products or new ways of thinking about educational travel and destinations. So as you know, a school trip can have many different phases. And we, our team, we are always trying to offer new types of travel by looking at the global trends, by understanding the needs of our schools, and by analyzing in general what destinations can offer to a group of students. So it's always an ongoing process, and you should stay always alert. And actually, your travel agent should be there to work with you in order to, you know, for the conception of your dream travel project. So first, if we can go to the next slide. First, I would like to speak about two classical North American destinations for educational travel. We have New York and the Quebec province. By changing the nature or the objective of your trip with your students, you can actually organize a whole new trip, even in a destination that you have traveled before. So for New York, we want to show you a little bit what can be done with the Spanish New York trip. We have been developing this for many years. And instead of having a traditional trip to New York, we include some specific activities like a Mexican cuisine workshop or a salsa dance workshop, or even a Harlem tour with a local guide who will emphasize the Hispanic history of the neighborhood. So as you see, you can take it, let's say, more traditional trip to New York and create a whole new experience for your students. And then the second North American destination is a combo. It's a Spanish Montreal and French Quebec combo. Canada, and particularly Quebec, as you know, is extremely rich in history, and its land has always welcomed people from outside, like myself. So the idea here is to combine your Spanish and your French students in one same trip, because Montreal and Quebec can have something to offer to everybody. So the idea of combining this Spanish and French students in one trip is also possible for another destinations. Like, for example, you can easily organize a trip that it would hit some of the most popular destinations in Europe and in Spain. Like, for example, spending 4 days in Paris and then taking a flight to Barcelona, spending more days in Barcelona. So that would make a total of a 9-10 days Spain and France trip, or do friends in Barcelona. So there are many ways we can look at this and try and find an alternative. But the idea is, if you combine your students, your French and Spanish students, you will have a bigger group of travelers. So it will create a more diverse itinerary and a cheaper experience for your kids and your families. Next slides. Perfect. So talking about language-oriented tours, the second kind of educational experience that I would like to share with you today is the Spanish immersion tours in Andalusia. Several cities like Sevilla, Granada, Malaga, Cádiz, they have been very popular for these kind of trips recently. These are cities with a lot of charm, with a lot of history, and the size is not too big, so we feel like home quite easily, and there are many things to do. So the program is characterized by the following structure, more or less. This kind of trip would look like something like having a Spanish course in the morning, 3-4 hours of a Spanish course in the morning in a local language school. We have excellent partnerships for that portion of the trip, and these schools are accredited by the Instituto Cervantes. So the academic side of the trip is very solid. The quality is very good. Then in the afternoons, we would have a cultural sport activity. So there are many things to do, like dance or cooking workshop. We can have a guided visit of the city. We can be attending a show, a flamenco show, for example. That's a classic one. Or even adding a little hike or doing kayak on the Guadalquivir if we're still in Sevilla. So many things to do in the afternoons. And the last part, and probably one of the most important to create this immersive experience for your students, is that it's a homestay accommodation. It's also possible to stay in hotels, but if you are open to actually try and do a homestay accommodation, it's actually an excellent idea for your students. They will have dinner and they will sleep with local families, so they will be for sure encouraged to speak Spanish, practice a little bit we have been learning during the morning. So those are for the language-oriented tours, and then I would like to, before going to the Q&A period, I would like to speak very briefly about two Latin American countries. Maybe they are a little bit less known by some of you potentially for an educational trip. We're speaking about Panama and Colombia. As I said, I'm currently in Costa Rica, and even though I'm in love with this country, even though it's an amazing destination for an educational trip, and it will be always like this, because Costa Rica, it really is an amazing country. It has become extremely popular and consequently quite expensive also, as you might know. Traveling to Costa Rica during the high season, March and April, it can be quite challenging in terms of logistics and availabilities. So that's why I would if we can go to the next slide, I would first recommend try, for example, to go to Panama. Oops, sorry. Go to Panama because you will have a similar trip in terms of activities, in terms of also the landscapes and the safety. However, the experience might be more comfortable for the simple reason that it is less crowded, it is less rushed, there is less traffic. In addition, we can easily organize a trip where the group stays in Panama City and you do full day excursions from Panama. So for a first time in the country, it's easier because we are not going to be changing hotels very often. So that makes it a bit easier for the group and for the chaperones to handle the group. And last but not least, we have Colombia. So one of my personal favorites. The country has been experiencing significant tourism development since the pandemic. The number of visitors have been increasing a lot, and for a good reason. First of all, if we stay in Bogota and the surrounding areas of Bogota, and we avoid all the north, like going to Cartagena, we can have a trip that is quite interesting financially. So the price is competitive, it's interesting if we compare to other international destinations. So that's a great point. Also, it's a very authentic and very culturally rich. So Colombians are extremely happy to receive us in their country. They are opening to tourism, so they are very welcoming. And finally, the itinerary is very diverse. So we have active activities. We can visit national parks. We can do some hikes. We can visit some waterfalls, and we can combine it with cultural activities. For example, like a cooking workshop or a graffiti workshop in Bogota, which is the capital of graffiti and urban art in the whole South American continent. And then that clash that we can experience between big cities like Bogota and then going to the rural areas and small towns in Colombia. And finally, regarding Colombia, it is a safe destination. The country has been fighting against the perception created by a long history of internal war and corruption, but things have been changing since the El Acuerdo de Paz in 2016. So obviously, the itineraries that we propose to the schools with us are to school trips, and the suppliers that we work with are used to receive students. Health and safety is non-negotiable. So in this kind of experiences, and that's our priority for any kind of trip that we organize. That's all from my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Back
much,
to you,
David.
Alexis.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One for you, actually, David. What would you consider ideal destination for entry-level French students and Spanish students?
Great. I would say Montreal and Quebec. It's very easy. We know the destination extremely well. We can do the Spanish Montreal. There's a lot of things to do in Spanish Montreal, like cuisine workshop, a dance workshop, also like a salsa one. So that could be easily organized. And then you can go to Quebec and experience all the French history of Canada. So that would combine it and do it quite well. It's if you're in the northeast area of the States, it's a motor coach, so you avoid any airport. So that might be, a very nice and sweet first experience.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one last question. Again, feel free to write questions in the chat. I have one last one from the chat. As a trip organizer, do we collect the money and registrations? Perhaps that's for you, Olivia.
Good question. So depending on the tour agency, at Jumpstreet, we have an online portal for all registration and payment platform. It's a secure payment platform online. So it's a great way to kind of not have to deal with all the financial aspect of the trip. It really goes through Jumpstreet directly. That being said, for new trips, the first time you're getting a trip off the ground, we do encourage you to kind of do an initial sign up, whether it's through a Google Sheet or handout sheets to parents, just to really kind of gauge what the interest level is before getting students to sign up and pay online. But once you're ready to go, all of that registration and payment is handled directly by the tour company.
Super, thank you. I have one last one that just popped in. Do you offer any fundraising opportunity? Olivia, that's for you as well.
Yeah, good questions. A couple things to point on. While it's not, we don't offer necessarily a fundraising opportunity through an organization. We do have kind of general tips and tricks for you as teachers that we're happy to pass along. And speaking of fundraising, on our online payment platform, for example, we do have it's a function on our payment platform that's called Help Me Travel. And what that is, it's a link that once you register for the trip, you're able to send that link to friends, to family members. I guess it's a bit like a GoFundMe, where you can send out the link, and then it could make for a great Christmas present, a great birthday present, where family members can make a donation directly towards your account. So it's just a good way to kind of spread the word about the trip and get others to help fund the trip.
Super, thank you. So I think there's no more questions. So if that's it for the questions, I wanted to say on behalf of Olivia, David, and all Jumpstreet, merci beaucoup, muchas gracias. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. If you want to start this beautiful journey of planning a trip, you can go to our website, jumpstreet.com. You can fill up a quote request, and within minutes we'll be able to get back to you with ideas and connect to start working on this fabulous trip. Again, from myself, from Olivia, David, merci beaucoup et bonne soirée.